Hello, everyone. Welcome to my show, The Four Direction. My name is Mary Apollo. I'm the host for Four Direction. It's a weekly current affairs show that we cover topics from around the globe. And today, we are just starting the discussion for today. How to achieve peace and democracy in South Sudan. Step, how to achieve peace and democracy in South Sudan. My guest today, she was the former SPLM External Relations Secretary, the first female secretary during the CPA 2008-2015. On October 2017, she announced her intention to stand for presidency in the 2018 South Sudanese general election. Jambo is the first female to run as a president candidate in South Sudan. Please welcome my guest, Suzan Jambo. Welcome, Suzan.
Thank you so much, Sister Mary. It's good to see you, to be with you here today, and to be with all your viewers today. And I really look forward to this exciting session. I've been admiring your work quite a while. Having a channel of your own, and you have your broadcast, and such an enthusiast journalist, young journalist, female journalist for that matter. And of course, I've gone through your roughly or through your resume and seen the achievements you have been making on human rights, democracy issues for no less close to about 10 years now. So I am really excited to be with you here today. And yes, we have a long journey towards democracy in our country, and it starts step by step. That's the philosophy behind it. Thank you for having me today.
Welcome. So first, let us start. What's wrong in South Sudan?
What's wrong in South Sudan? South Sudan, we are a society that has been marginalized, historically marginalized, systematically discriminated against along many lines, primarily racially, because South Sudanese, we are Africans, and in the Greater Sudan, there was the pan-Arabism policy. So we were discriminated against this racially, and as a result, of course, marginalized in terms of development, etc. And we took up a long struggle for our freedom since 1955. So you can look at it that way. That's a society that for generations has seen nothing but violence. Role modeling has been shaped in and around violence, and so basically the culture that we have in South Sudan that is predominant in our way of living, our way of thinking and reasoning and being as a people is around violence. And so this is the major problem that we have in South Sudan. We're not able to speak to one another when we disagree in a peaceful, in an amicable, in a civil manner. Immediately we carry the gun, and we think that's the only language we can understand or can hear from each other. So this is our problem, really, primarily. But we have many other problems, of course. Like any other part of the world, there are elements or factors such as bad governance, such as corruption, such as favoritism, policies of exclusionism, and all that. So obviously, when the system of rule and the system of thinking and reasoning is all about the gun and violence, which is predominantly the culture of militarism, then obviously there will be no answerability, no checks and balances, no abilities to exercise democracy. So citizens are actually rendered to becoming subjects instead of citizens. And so the one with the guns rules, the one with the highest military ranks is the biggest person, not necessarily based on their competence, on their way of delivering services to the people and all that. So then violence basically is number one enemy of democracy and peace. This is the challenges we're facing in South Sudan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So you were an external advisor relation for the president from 2010 to 2013, and then you complained 2013. You said that there is main advisor from the international organization. And you also disagree with President Kiir over the appointment of his brother-in-law, George Deng, at the time. Previously to that, you were part of the committee that wrote the national constitution of South Sudan. And there is a report from Transparency International talk about corruption and governance in South Sudan. They say at that time, SPLM has done they have imposed some mistakes in the United States in instance. In Baltimore, SPLM was declared in winner despite of citizen voting overwhelmingly for the independent candidate. The impositions of the SPLM government triggered violence, resulting in death and injuries. So the report basically said that there was some political incidents happening that time, and you are part of the system at that time. Why you didn't came out and
Excuse me. Yeah, there are a number of things we have to all structure in how things happen. I have been a long-standing member of the SPLM on voluntary basis that's when I got into the SPLM in 1998 during the peace negotiation. So I entered into the SPLM at the phase when it was now the power of the pen, as it were, the power of negotiation and diplomacy was what was at the time, which is championing of human rights of the marginalized people of New Sudan at that time, which is South Sudan, as well as Nuba Mountains and the Ngesana Hills, and all the other Sudanese who are marginalized of African origin. So that was the phase I got into the SPLM. Obviously, SPLM as an institution at the time and since its establishment was not far from perfect, was not exercising internal democracy and all that, like most liberation movement during the war, because they do not have checks and balances, and also it is all about the language of war and the culture of war, as it were. So they're not answerable, let's say, to the judiciary or any type of constitution of civil administration as such. So it has its own backlog of those kind of issues. So for people like myself, I was considered at the time one of the new young generation coming up at the time in '98, as well as a reformist, because I come with a background also in law and human rights and all that, and I had worked previously for a very short time on human rights issues with the United Nations, UNICEF. So basically, it's been a struggle. Even the fact that to include women, to include youth, to include people based on merit instead of favoritism, like your brother or your sister or someone who is a military person, but based on someone's qualifications, on meritocracy, as it were. That was even a challenge to introduce to the SPLM at the time. So I was known immediately from the outset as a reformist within the SPLM, and that's why I also was put as part of one of my first assignments was the women conference, the very first women conference held actually by Liberation Movement in the history up to now in 1998, in which women came together. Over 700 women delegates from all over South Sudan, Nuba Mountains and Blue Nile came together and made demands for justice and equality for women as well. So that was my first assignment as an advisor. So this can show how much push I was always from the outset when I joined. And this is the stuff that I worked on. And then immediately the following year, which was 1999, which was the first judiciary conference to basically remove all the military laws, martial laws, and to codify the laws into civilian codes. So that was the second assignment. That also we were 5 commissioners. I was one of the 5 and the only woman, of course, at the time also a youth. So you can imagine the kind of work some of us have been undertaking. And then again in 2005, just before the signing of the peace agreement, I was also a commissioner within the first law of the CPA. If you look at that constitution, the first constitution of 2005, I made sure, at least from my side, as the only woman commissioner at that law drafting committee that was appointed by the late Dr. John Garang, I made sure that women's rights were included there as human rights, children, and all the universal laws basically on human rights, on freedom and freedom of expression, liberty, etc. All the conventions and the statutes and international laws to do with basic people's rights, what we call the preamble. So if you look at the first constitution of 2005 to 2011, that constitution was really headed somewhere. And we as the commissioner then made sure that we studied similar kind of nations like us, nations that came out of conflict, such as South Africa, which at the time also came from apartheid and then moved on to an African rule of democracy. So we looked at that as a post-liberation nation. We looked at Eritrea also, some of the laws in Eritrea, so that we do not fall under the same pits of dictatorship. The same way we looked at Nigeria, which is a federal system law. So we made sure that we wanted to apply laws that are applicable to South Sudan as an African nation from other African nations of similar experiences and background. The same thing with Germany, because we felt that Germany and the US, of course, as international countries that are renowned also for their checks and balances and systems of democracy. So the first constitution, if you look at it, was really brilliant. However, in 2005 onwards, even though there was a constitution as such, but it became like a lip service token. The constitution was shelved and people started showing other colors. At the time, I was not in SPLM. As soon as we signed the peace agreement and everything in 2005, I decided to step away from politics because I realized that I perhaps went in there a little too young and a little too early, and I needed some workings, including within my family, of course, my personal life, but also with the community. So I decided to continue to work with civil society organizations. I felt that the government of the day in 2005, let them do their thing. These militarized men, generally, critically, where all the gods and their thoughts are very different. They're very difficult. And I felt that let me continue working with civil society, empower like-minded people who really want growth and development from the grassroots, from the communities, from the people. So 2005 up to 2008, that's what I was doing. So all the reports that were coming from Human Rights Watch and all these other groups, of course, some of us would be asked as independent civil society actors and we'd be told. And so we shared our part. However, in 2008, South Sudan was also coming into crossroads. We were looking at if you look at the comprehensive peace agreement framework, the 6.5 year period, we were nearing two very major things. One was the first general elections in South Sudan, in the history of South Sudan ever, as well as the referendum in 2011. Mm-hmm. So basically, things were not going well. Mm-hmm. It seems like when I quit politics 2005 to 2008 to focus on work with civil society and human rights issues and empowerment of communities, SPLM, the ruling party at the time, turned tyrant. SPLM changed completely. SPLM became the party that forgot that it came from a liberation struggle and that it made promises to the people of justice, equality, liberty, and prosperity. SPLM now became a self-serving government, all about self-awarding contracts and appointing their own relatives, their own family, their own friends, and it was corruption abound everywhere in South Sudan, sadly. So, but we were at crossroads. Mm-hmm. We as South Sudanese have struggled so hard since 1955 for us to be recognized as human beings. All we wanted was just to be recognized as human beings. We did not even ask for much, So as a people, that's all we wanted. Now, the ruling party, which was a signatory to the Comprehensive Peace Agreement, was steering away from the direction of what we entrusted them as a people. So obviously, it was a critical time that is SPLM in a place of trust? Can SPLM really be able to handle this referendum, this election?
What kind of challenges you're talking about? Can you highlight them?
I'm sorry?
The kind of the challenges that you are, can you highlight them for us?
Yeah, the challenges were, of course, SPLM now turned tyrant, which basically SPLM no longer cared for the welfare of the people. For example, SPLM made promises that as soon as we have our own entity or we become the rulers of the land, we shall ensure justice, equality, liberty, and all that. There wasn't any of that. I mean, you look, SPLM leaders were driving big cars. They were living lavishly. And the gap between them and the masses, the majority of the South Sudanese, which is over 90%, was poverty. They were under extreme poverty. No electricity, no water, running water in their taps, no medical services, no hospitals, no schools, no anything. So billions of dollars and goodwill wishes from the world community. I mean, the world community in 2005 pledged no less than $4.6 billion for South Sudan to offstart the development with. Where did that money go between 2005 and 2008? You know, by the time when I came to the SPLM, I realized the money that we pledged in Norway, because I was in Oslo in Norway when the donors were very generous in pledging for South Sudan to offstart its development. And then also there was frozen assets, South Sudan natural resources, oil revenues running to millions and billions of dollars were also frozen per this peace agreement by the world community, ordered the Bashir government to freeze that money, not to use it, and to give it to the government of South Sudan after the signing of the peace agreement to also help boost its economy so it can offstart serious development. So none of that translated into reality. And so here you are, as a person whose ancestors also, just like you are, like all of us South Sudanese, our ancestors gave so dearly to South Sudan so we become free people, so we become dignified people. We are at crossroads. SPLM is all marred with all this corruption and bad governance, lack of democracy, lack of anything that you can, decent type of governance. At the same time, we as South Sudanese could or would not be able to exercise our referendum. It was a very difficult challenge. So when I was approached, I looked at it very critically. I'm like, SPLM is so corrupt and all this is happening. But our people desire, which has been since 1955, way before even SPLM was thought about. I said, let me come and stand with the people. So I came into that position in order to help do my part, to help rebuild and reclaim our image as South Sudanese through the SPLM, which was the ruling party, a tool that we had no choice to live with. It was a tool, SPLM was a tool at the time because it was the only channel that has signed the peace agreement on behalf of the people of South Sudan. So it's either you join the SPLM to make sure that that referendum, those general elections, which were prerequisite within the CPA in that order of chronology, which is before the referendum, had to be undertaken. So it was a really tough decision. Personally, for me, it was a very, I battled with that decision because what am I doing? Joining hands with the dirty people, joining hands with those bad people, but at the same time, but my people, which is our people, the majority, the ones who gave selflessly since 1955, millions of souls died for our freedom. So the choice was very difficult, but it was a must to do. Yes, and then I got to the SPLM and I realized the internal problems. There were internal problems, and it was basically selfishness galore. Everybody doing his or her own thing in order to acquire wealth, in order to public wealth, that is, to steal from the public and all these things. So it became a tough journey internally to try and not only reform now, because it was not possible to reform, but at least to bring some sanity. Can we at least be cohesive? I mean, even in 2010, when we were getting into the general elections, the SPLM as a ruling party was divided. They were not wanting to make up their mind who is the person that should be the flag bearer of the national elections. And I was one person who said, for example, I mean, what choice do we have? SPLM is the ruling party signatory with the National Congress Party of Sudan, and we have no choice but to continue that. But and so that vis-a-vis the other South Sudanese political parties, because also they didn't want, and for right reason, they felt discriminated against and bullied around by the ruling party SPLM. So the other political parties felt being increasingly isolated in political space in South Sudan. On one hand. On the other hand, within the SPLM itself, the voices of the corrupt leaders was becoming more and more louder and stronger within the ruling party. So as a result, they did not want to flaunt the candidate to become the flag bearer of the political party. There was wrangles inside. So I was one person, and I said, look, practically speaking, we lost the late Dr. John Garang, who signed on behalf of the SPLM the comprehensive peace agreement already. So but we're lucky that Bashir did not make it an issue. When Garang died, Bashir did not say, well, since Garang died, because we as South Sudanese, we have the experience before that any leader will come and say, we'll tear that peace agreement and say to you that this is not the Bible, this is not the Quran, I am not bound by it. Nimeri did that in 1983 when he decided to call it quits with the Addis Ababa Agreement of 1972 for South Sudan. So we felt also Bashir could have done the same after Garang died in July, untimely, of course, and tragically in July 2005, but he did not. So keep the peace together, keep the affairs together, keep the PCPA together. Obviously, the chairman at the time of the SPLM was President Salva Kiir. So I said the obvious thing is for us to have President Salva Kiir as the flag bearer, because he is the person who's been running the SPLM after Garang's death. If we change that equilibrium, we're going to have problems. And not that any of them was any better than the other. But at the time, some of us felt that within the SPLM that President Salva Kiir, as the chairman of the party, and also a person who is a low-key person, has not been known during the movement time for corruption or stuff like that. There were other people who were known for those things during the struggle in the party. So you have many devils, and then there is a less devil kind of situation. However, of course, obviously, Salva Kiir himself also proved to be a person afterwards, especially after 2013, a different leader. Maybe that's a story for another question. I don't know, but he also deviated completely. He became just like any or what I would call any of the others, you know. So it's a complicated internal issues within the SPLM. But the most important thing was, as an institution, the only one that signed the comprehensive peace agreement, it was only logical that it continued this comprehensive peace agreement, because it was bound by law. It is the one that to implement the remainder of the peace agreement, which is the general elections in 2010 as well as the referendum in 2011. So you can imagine if some of us were to say, okay, throw SPLM out and bring other political party, then the CPA would have been also thrown out altogether. It was a very complicated, very challenging decision. Yeah.
Yeah, just the question, the dividing and the issues that they have the time from the CPA until the national election. Why they didn't solve these issues? Why the SPLM leadership doesn't sit together and to find a way that they can move forward and lead the party with one person? They all come.
You know, the same way I told you from earlier on, the level of reasoning within our old gods leadership. I mean, these people have some of them have been there since even Anyanya 1, 1955. People like Salva Kiir, they were there since Anyanya 1. And then you have, even if you look at the age of Dr. Riek Machar, the same thing. A person that was born a long time ago, they have seen enough conflicts in the country. So to me, I see them as people that are not able to reason logically, are not able to you know, like if you look at other nations around the world, for example, the United States of America, which is different scenario. Let me look at Kenya. Okay, look at Kenya. Kenya is an African nation very close to South Sudan. Kenya has had very little violence in comparison, of course, with South Sudan. Their struggle for their independence, if you look at it, the Mau Mau, there were pockets of people who had guns, but the majority of them were pretty organized along the lines of working undercover. The work of their revolution was all undercover. So the foundation was laid in such a way in little time. When they gained their independence in 1963, immediately they established systems. So they had no any span or running into violence or violent way of reasoning. So Kenya to this day, even when 1991, when they began struggling, the movement for multi-partyism began in Kenya in 1991. If you look at it, the history of it, all the politician activists, the political activists and human rights activists, etc., democracy activists, they were able to reason. They were able to table these issues through common action, through common objectives, alliance building, and so forth and so on. So they never at any time contemplated, or at least not visibly, at least not in reality, at any given time did they decide to take up arms to prove a point of disagreement. So their way of living, their way of structuring the political system from the time when they started in the before the independence has always remained stable along the lines of thinking logically, thinking common action, doing common, fronting activities. So basically coming together and articulating the issues and making the demands. This has been the political activism in Kenya for change. The same thing when you look at a nation like Tanzania, which is a far more peaceful country and stable compared to Kenya, in the sense that the founding father of Tanzania instilled in the people of Tanzania nationalism as to tribalism or any division or favoritism. So Tanzanians are treated equal regardless of the ethnic community or the tribe that you come from. So basically, this kind of way of reasoning, of thinking, of putting things together helps in a long way in how you iron out your differences. You use the constitution, you use the media, you use peaceful protest. You use those kind of mechanisms in order to rally people behind issues that are for change. So basically, you come together as a group of individuals, you articulate the issues on behalf of many, and then you begin to work on consensus building by going around with the people among the various communities and talking to them under trees, in villages, in whatever, in schools, in churches. Are you happy with the situation? Is it okay to have one party that is dictating on us? Is it okay to have a dictator? Is it okay that we're lacking in development? We're lacking in this. And the people begin to articulate their issues. And so the organized individuals, be it civil society, be it political parties, listen, and they take up the action a little further, and more action is furthered and continued. But in South Sudan, we've had a culture of militarism. The slightest disagreement, they organize a military coup, they organize an armed rebellion, and another armed rebellion, and another armed rebellion. It's just a vicious cycle of violence, which must really end. This is what happened in the SPLM. The division among them, they had their own internal issues of lack of democracy. They wanted to have, and it was right. To me now, when I look at it, by 2013 or 2012, after we raised the flag, everybody had a right to form their own party. Everybody should have the opportunity to form their own party. Everybody should have the opportunity to challenge the leadership, even within the SPLM. SPLM political leaders within the SPLM should have had the opportunity to challenge in a constitutional manner, their differences with the current leadership at the time. So that's their right. They should not have been stopped. That's their right, and they should have continued. But they did not continue. They had another plan. Because in South Sudan, if you disagree, then I'm going to show you how much I disagree with you and how much you're going to come down and bow to me through me arming myself with my community, so that you come down, make concessions with me and dialogue with me. That's been the culture. So it's a deeply rooted culture. Yeah.
We still on our show. Thank you for all the viewers who are watching us. Our topic today is how is step out of achieve democracy in South Sudan.
Yeah.
My guest is Suzan Jambo. She's the founder of the Step Movement. Please send us your thought about what you think, how we can achieve peace and democracy in South Sudan. Also leave your comments and share with more audience so that we can hear different point of views and different perspectives. Talk to us about how do you think peace and democracy will be achieved in South Sudan. So we move forward. October 2017.
Yeah.
You have announced your intention to run for the presidency in 2018 for the general election. You say that I believe the character of the leadership and strength through my ability to courage from my competitors, comrade in the SPLM party to lead the nation. So just talk to me about the vision and the program that you had that time.
If you have been a witness for as long as I have been, 20
Mhm.
years. Every time you saw, and during the negotiation, for example, of the comprehensive peace agreement, every time you saw some military commander in the negotiation would disagree with the word human rights, with the words girl child rights, with the word inclusivity of all communities, inclusivity of civil rights,
Mhm.
civil society, basic freedoms, media freedoms, freedom of expression in the media, and all that. You always spark. You try, of course, to correct the situation there and then, and you try to influence the discussion there and then, but you realize it's not going far because all of them think like that. So
Mhm.
what you do is you park the issues aside. You're like, at the nearest opportunity, I'm going to push for it again. And you link up with other like-minded civil society activists and media activists, and you try to say, how can we further this action? Because it seems in the political paradigm, it's not going anywhere.
Mhm.
Nobody's wanting to defend that with me there. So can I align with you? Can we work on that? And then so forth and so on. Then you look at medical services, you look at education, you realize that there's not even any brand new university of any stature, of any credibility has been built since 2005 up to now. Then you are like, there's something got to be done here. Why? Where is the money for higher education in the country? You also see that women are not 35% really in the decision making level. There are token of women everywhere, perhaps in some places, but not really fulfilling the quota. And also, there isn't meritocracy there to defeat the purpose, to make that, you know what, you have women, they're the women. Okay, whether they're doing anything or not, that's another story for another day. So
Mhm.
basically, it's not a genuine. You question the authenticity or the genuineness in inclusivity of women, really. And then you look at their absence of youth, and so forth and so on. And then you look also services such as agriculture, which is supposed to be, the economy should be diversified so that we have agriculture boosted and booming in South Sudan. Instead, there is reliance on quick cash money, which is from the oil revenue. But then also, when you look at that, you look at environmental degradation issues in the practices there, that the money as well, the revenues are utilized in lacking transparency. We don't even know where the money goes. And of course, expenditure on the military is huge. It's probably about 80% or 70% of the economy. And when you look at it, are we going to eat military? Are we going to educate military? Are we going to be medicated by military? Of course, none of that. So then you see all these things are priority issues. And then you realize the single most, and of course, then when you look at the opposition from 2013 primarily up to now, and you see all their level of thinking and reasoning is along the same lines as the ones in the government. There's no difference. No one is really pushing consistently for the issue of equality, justice, human rights, development, infrastructure. It's just lip service. Whatever they say is not really done and followed through and through. Then you realize the single most missing question in South Sudan has been and continues to be is the leadership question. We have a leadership question in South Sudan, that we have a problem that whomsoever has been in power by this way or that way or another way have do not have the interest of the nation, that is of the people and the land and the environment and future generations at heart at all. You know, by waging wars, you're actually polluting the environment. You're killing people. You're doing so much damage to everything in the country. So basically, by 2017, I decided to finally say, you know what, I have been a witness to see all these things and I've observed every one of them, and nothing is happening, nothing is coming up. So let me work around uniting the youth, the women, and all the communities of South Sudan. We, the communities of South Sudan, what I call we 64, the 64 communities of South Sudan, because we have suffered, we continue to suffer from ethnic division and polarization along even violent lines. So basically, the only way is to be able to rally the people behind, bring them together, and also to restore some sanity into our thinking by advocating our unity equals to peace.
Mhm.
Because by the time, as a Nuer, and as a Dinka I am, and as a Bari I am, and as a Lotuka and all that, I'm able to, if we come together, then I'm able to break the mistrust that has been instilled in us, upon us, by the political leadership. And
Mhm.
when we're united, then we're able to look at the nation and her interests, and able to identify the right leadership. So basically, I know, of course, what I'm up against. I'm again up against the military guard, the military male old guards. So
Mhm.
it's a huge challenge. It's a tough challenge, but the love for my nation, the love for the love for the people, and seeing the potential, the huge untapped potentials of our nation. It just it compels anyone with reasonable thinking to say something has to be done to this nation, and we cannot go on and on and on forever. And of course 2017, if you look at it, 2013, 14, 15, it's about 4 years at the time or so of waiting on people to make peace, and there was no peace coming. There was nothing that was coming forward. And if you look at it up to today, yeah, the situation is
Did
there. So
you find that is space that time to reach out to the public to tell them about your program and the vision that you have?
yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I wasted no time from the time where we've, of course, many volunteers came forward. Many young people, men and women, came forward, and they were excited. They were very happy, and they were, how, where has steps been?
Mm-hmm.
Where has steps been all this time? Where have you been, Suzan Jambo? And that kind of stuff. So basically, many people came forward, and many people volunteered. And so we have functioning working teams all over in different parts of South Sudan, as well as within Africa and the world. You know, wherever we are, South Sudanese, they're bound to be a steps chapter or team that is working together on the issues. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's been embraced. Yeah.
Okay, you say it steps towards peace and democracy. We organize groups of people with similar political aims
Yeah.
and needs that seeks to influence public policy by getting our candidate elected to the public.
Uh,
Is this step a new political party to work in what the SPLM has failed to achieve as a political party in its manifesto or mission and vision?
yes, definitely. Steps is a needs based party in all the gaps that we have as a society in South Sudan.
Mhm.
Lack of peace, people's peace. Something that I experienced, like I said, I always park,
Mhm.
because when I can't solve it, I always park it when I can solve it. For example, when we were signing the comprehensive peace agreement, I advocated very hard as a negotiator in the CPA, that we do not need only a political peace, but we need a people's peace. So my thought was that we need to have further dialogues among our various communities within South Sudan. At the time, of course, I was bearing in mind two major issues. One, Greater Upper Nile, which had so many armed militia groups at the time in 2000 and year 99, let's say up to 2005 when we signed the peace agreement. At the time, Upper Nile had more than 17 armed groups at that time. And so to me, these needed dialogue. It's not a matter of just taking guns away from them and say, okay, I'll appoint you as a commissioner or as a whatever, because that's what they do. That's what we do in South Sudan with the peace agreements. So to me, it needed further dialogue among the communities. There was a time that there would be a time as a result when the communities dialogue among themselves, the various sections that are fighting one another, they would begin to realize the people who have been spearheading the violence among them are actually war criminals. They're not leaders. Because by the time you sit down with the communities and we talk to one another as communities, and we realize that from my community, 100 people have been killed. From their community, they will say maybe 1,000 people have been killed. And then we look at it, was it worth it? Is there any reason whatsoever that XYZ number of people have died? Then we realize, no. Then we begin to ask ourselves, who gave us guns? Who brought guns here? Then we begin to pin down and the culprits, the real people who have been feuding us, because we lived together side by side since time immemorial. We didn't have problems that necessitated for us to kill each other en masses the way we do. Maybe one or two deaths, and then the elders would meet, the chiefs would meet, and they would resolve the conflicts amicably. So basically, that was I had in mind Upper Nile, Greater Upper Nile, because we had 17 armed groups at the time. And then the second thing is the culture of violence prevalent generally in South Sudan. I wanted us people to begin to dialogue as a people and say, what do we see peace ourselves as South Sudanese? Is the comprehensive peace agreement only a political agreement, or is it supposed to be about us to walk about our daily lives, to sleep in our homes soundly, or to hear gunshots and all these kind of things? So people would be able to discuss all these issues. So I was opposed vehemently by my colleagues at the CPF from the SPLM side at the time when we were negotiating. So this is, for me, is a parked issue. I had kept these issues. I'm carrying them forever on me, that the most central problem we have, challenge or obstacle even to a certain extent, is the absence of peace, the feel of peace, the culture of peace, the ability to live at peace, the ability to walk around and feel, the only person who should carry a gun is a person who is trained to carry the gun, and they should be in the barracks, military people or the police who are trained to protect the civilians, but nobody else. Nobody else should have guns in their houses as though they're having sugar and salt. That's crazy. That's something that it should not be in the mentality and the thinking. So basically, to me, this is the most absent thing, and that's what STEPS is all about. STEPS wants to restore and bring about a movement of peace in South Sudan, where we really begin to question, how was it where we were before as a people, when we had peace? Do we still yearn for that? Do we still need that? Do we still want that? And how do we want it? And then from there, we begin to look into the issues of equality, inequality, because what brought about the lack of peace among us as a people? Or some people who were who never carried guns, and they're transformed overnight into gun carriers. So they will begin to come forward and say, well, I wanted to defend my community. The reason why I decided to take up arms, because I want to defend my community from the other community. So we want to begin to discuss these things people to people. And that is something that for us as STEPS is very, very important. And that you cannot build a nation without we as a people. You cannot build a nation by saying, I, my tribe. We can't do that, Every tribe, 1 + 1 = 2, 3, until we're 64. So if we have the right laws, the right constitution, aspects expressed by the people of South Sudan, what they see as what the constitution should be, how do they see a president in South Sudan? What kind of powers the president should have? How do they see parliament, the legislative body? How do they see the judiciary? Those kind of expressions that they will express, that shall now be articulated further and put together into technical words, of course, by the experts. So that's the vision we see in South Sudan: constitutionalism, where the constitution, is above everybody. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
You have the constitution, this amazing constitution, and you have been part of it, part of the people who wrote it.
The current constitution isn't. The current constitution is a new constitution, 2005 to 2002. Currently, it's a different constitution. There is a current transitional constitution. For a country to become a new country, a brand new country, like what we were in 2011, after we had the referendum, there had to be a new constitution. 2011, yeah, because for you to become a brand new country, like the way we have become the Republic of South Sudan 2011, we had to have our own flag, the name of the nation, the national anthem, what kind of constitution, all that, and spelt in the constitution. So obviously there were another team of commissioners who were appointed at that time by President Salva Kiir as the president of the country at that time in 2011, and they're the ones who drafted that new constitution, where they gave so many powers to the president. And this is why we have our wounds to be licked today. We're licking our wounds today because they gave too many powers to the president. They thought he was their friend. They have to protect him. And, they personalized the constitution, which should never be the case. A constitution must always look at the common good of the people, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. So regardless of who is in the power, constitution must be promulgated.
And it always say that all South Sudanese should be equal.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, but even the president. I mean, the powers of the president. When you look at the Constitution, or when you look at the National Security Act, I mean, these are laws that all came about after 2011. 2011 was the Constitution, and in 2014 was the National Security Act. Acts of Parliament, acts of the country, any laws in the country. When there are put further laws to further the constitution a bit more, it has to go through the parliament. So why the parliament of the day in 2014 passed such a law as the National Security Act, in which is gouging freedom of expression? So all these things happened later on. I was not part of that, and
I want to ask, like, at that time, why you didn't come out and talk about it when you were in the system?
Because of course, you try and talk about something like that in South Sudan, you're dead. You are dead. But what you try to say inside the party, within the party, wait a second, this does not make any sense. But by 2014 and 15, I was already on my way out. They had already made their plans to exit me, to boot me. You understand that? Because 2013, I don't know if you saw it on YouTube. In 2013, as a former secretary for SPLM External Relations, part of my work was to organize the political parties to work together and dialogue with them. So I pushed hardest December exactly 2013, when I saw the fallout between all the political actors and the ruling, even within SPLM, the ruling party, but against Salva Kiir. So I rushed quickly, and I tried to dialogue with other political parties in South Sudan, and we came together, and we wanted, if you see the speech that I read out, and it's on YouTube, I really emphasize on peaceful dialogue between the people to people dialogue between and among the people of South Sudan. So that was my move. My move was immediately to try and dialogue with the political parties and the civil society and the media to work together how to arrest the situation before it went out of hand. Because now these are two leaders, President Kiir and Riek Machar and other leaders, fighting each other, and it went into military. The Bor, Malakal, and all that, Juba, what happened in Juba in December 2013. So to me, I didn't want that to go further. I wanted to make sure that through diplomacy, and if you see, the speech was very, very clear on the measures that I was planning to do. But obviously then, come January 2014, a lot of isolation began happening for me. So between February and June 2014, I almost quit the SPLM. I decided to be away from the SPLM because it was really hard to put any sanity into the heads of the leadership in Juba at the time. So I went back again. I said, let me try again in June 2014. Maybe I can bring some sense or something. And now to step up the diplomacy within East Africa and the world, countries that have interest for South Sudan, if we can dialogue with them, if they can boost the diplomacy, if they can boost the political dialogue between the President Kiir and Dr. Riek Machar. Kiir would agree. He would say that's fine, that sounds good and everything, but then at the same time, he would do the opposite. So basically pitting communities against each other. So, you were trying to do some things, but then it's not happening. So basically, and then you see yourself increasingly also being sidelined in the party internally. So less and less powers, and in Juba, very well, with the National Security Act of 2014, it was done in such secrecy, cooked in such secrecy, and everybody was surprised. There it is. You have it. We control you. You say any word, you disappear. You say anything, you get killed. So people started, even leadership, different levels of leadership within Juba, within the ruling party, began getting scared. I mean, there was fear. There was really valid fear among the people of the leadership within South Sudan, because if you were not the real ultimate leader in Juba at the time, then who are you, the rest of you, Yeah.
Just a question. This constitution has all these amazing articles, but still there is a problem in implementing it. What do you think the problem? How can we fix this gap? Because most of
the current constitution is not a beautiful constitution. I'm sorry to this.
Some articles like 16, and then the article that talk about torture and like all this article addressing these current issues, but what is happening under the ground is opposite then.
Yeah, you know, when you have a constitution that you see it's not consistent even within itself, then there is a problem. You see, constitution cannot contradict itself. You cannot have one or two articles that look good and two or three articles that don't look good. It will not make any sense. So if you have certain articles that shun torture and whatnot, because the ones you're quoting, it's probably most likely copy, cut, and paste from the previous constitution, and they brought in their own parts that do not make any sense, like extra powers to the president. You know, so basically, you cannot have a constitution that can be followed. For one, if it's not consistent within itself. For two, yeah, exactly, because you cannot talk of torture and things, and then at the same time, you derive an act of parliament, which is the National Security Act of 2014, quoting another part of the constitution. That's why you brought this act, and then which becomes now making it a further consolidation of that part of the constitution itself, of course, in totality. Then it defeats the purpose as well. So the article of the act of 2014 that empowers the national security on any suspicion, on any ground that they see themselves fitting, they can arrest anyone. And so basically, when you have any access in any part of the constitution that is not subject to scrutiny, checks and balances, then you run yourself into further complications and further misinterpretation and misapplication of the constitution itself. So basically, it's a very intricate thing. You cannot have, for one, inconsistency within the very same constitution, but then at the same time, you cannot have other arms of the government having extra powers. You understand that? And so basically, it defeats the purpose. Yeah, look what has been happening in Juba with political detainees, with media activists, with human rights activists, and all that. You express your opinion. Next thing you have disappeared. You're not there. You know. So,
and how can this problem be solved?
Well, this problem can only be solved, to be very honest with you, through democracy. To me, right now, there is no way out, but the current government must step aside. I have, and I tell you that earlier on, up to February 2020, I was of the firm belief that this year, let them have their peace. Both President Kiir and Riek Machar, let them have their peace. Let them do whatever they want to do for now, and continue with this peace agreement so that we get on with the election phase. You understand that? Yeah. But the problem is that so far, it has taken them almost 6 months to form the transitional government. So if it takes you 6 months to form the transitional government, does that mean that you're trying to buy time? Prolong the transitional period? And even earlier question, this transitional period, does it start from the time they form the government of unity, February, or the one of June 2020, or from the time they signed this Khartoum peace agreement in September 2018? If that's the case, then we're counting months before we should prepare for elections. So basically, there's so many technical question marks that we need to ask ourselves. This peace agreement was signed September 2018 for a period of 3.5 years with a 6-month for the preparation. So they asked for an extension. If you remember, in May, I think May 2019, they asked for an extension of the first 6 months. So they said it shouldn't start as of the deadline of May. that is the running of the period of 3.5 years. So they asked for an extension, which was until November 2019, and then after that they asked for another 100 days extension. And now and now they stopped asking people extension. They just ignored anyone, and they will form the government whenever they feel like. So this makes somebody like me to say, I do not want anything to do with them anymore. We as a people should say we don't want anything to do with them. How much more time do you keep asking people for in order to form the most basic thing that already is included in the literature of the disagreement of 2018? One, the most important thing primarily, meanwhile, what is happening in the country? People are dying. People are dying in South Sudan. That's a fact. Conflicts are still going on. The war itself hasn't really stopped. Poverty is going on. Failure of the economy. No government that is really functioning per se, and so many things. How much more do these political actors need time in order for us to go now on our knees completely? We will be finished if they continue to delay and derail matters. Something has to be put into to cut through this what I call complacency. There is too much complacency in the equilibrium of what's going on in our country. There's just no one to ask these people and to demand of these people and to force these people to do something in the country, to at least fulfill what they say they will do. I mean, you sign an agreement and you can't even fulfill it.
The president, in his speech celebrating 9th of July, he said that the revitalized peace agreement, he said that we are aware of the slow progress that is being made, and by urge partners in the unity government to work together to resolve the remaining issue. He said that they are going to work on it to solve the current problems in the country. And at the time that they still have some agenda like the security, they haven't yet start working on it because they don't have budget. What is the answer for this? What's going to come out of his speech?
I've stopped believing in any words that coming from any part of the presidency, be it President Kiir or Dr. Riek Machar. I'll tell you point blank. I have stopped personally, and I know many South Sudanese have stopped believing in any words that come from there because nothing is happening. So we really must be brave enough to think outside the box right now as we speak. Like I said to you, up to February 2020, I still had hope that these two can pull it together. But look, the formation of the national government and then the formation of the federal government, the government of the states, the governors, that is the appointment of the governors, so basically to me, these two guys are not interested in peace. As South Sudanese, I'm urging South Sudanese, I'm urging all of us to come together as a people, to come together, and we need to think outside the box. We must make it the loudest message and clearest message from all of us as South Sudanese. We have nothing to do with you anymore. You have wasted enough of our time as a people, enough of our resources and everything. We have given you more than enough time to come together. How much does it take to come together? 7 years and we're counting. 7 years. We're going the same circle and cycle, going round and round around the issues. And they will always find something to say at some point to make us, whichever side of the divide you are, to make you believe they're telling you the truth. But the truth of the matter is for all of us to see as South Sudanese. We can all see with our eyes what the situation is like. Look, the clearest example now is the issue of two issues. One, the issue of COVID-19. The whole world.
At point.
Yeah, I'm just relating. Sorry, go ahead.
What do you think the government, the measurement that and the strategy they should take to fight the COVID-19 outbreak?
Okay, that leave that topic for its time, or maybe I'll tie it a little. But I'm trying to tie in with the whole issue of people losing patience, and it's time to think outside the box. To me, this is a bigger issue, or a very important issue that we must talk about. Along those lines, test the government of South Sudan. I mean, test all the political actors who have now in government, they have been sworn in, they're in government, and we know and everything, but nothing is happening. COVID-19, COVID-19. When the rest of the world is already thinking lockdown, post-lockdown, to lift the lockdown, and to look into the economy, what's going on with the economy and things like that. South Sudan, which is another factor, the second factor, is busy killing each other. Look at the tribal fightings that have been going on in Greater Upper Nile during the time of lockdown. I mean, who in their sanest mind, in the most sane thinking, or even insane thinking, would think that while COVID is killing people and South Sudan is totally unable to cope with COVID, no preparations or anything whatsoever, but yet people are being killed from live bullets. COVID is killing, and live bullets is killing. Poverty is killing, hunger is killing, live bullets is also killing. It does not make any sense. And not even one sentence of consolation to the population of South Sudan. Can we just fight one common enemy called COVID-19? There's not even one consolation from the leadership in South Sudan, the presidency, or any other leader in South Sudan to say to the people, our people, please put your guns down. And let's fight another invisible enemy that is going to kill us. We don't even know at what magnitude, you know? So that's one test that anybody for South Sudan needs to say, you know what? We do not have leadership in Juba as we speak. So can we rally as a people of South Sudan? Can we unite regardless of my tribe, regardless of my gender, and regardless of my age? We need to come together, South Sudanese, in order to make it an ultimatum. You have not done this. Are you going to do it within, let's say, 2 weeks? We give them an ultimatum of 2 weeks. Do it or quit. Do it or step aside. We want to call for elections right now. That kind of ultimatum. That's what South Sudanese need to do, because we are babysitting them. We're basically, oh yeah, this, oh yeah, every day an excuse, and we're babysitting them. And that's enough is enough, because then something has to be thought outside the box. Something has to really come out outside the box for us to be able to move forward, because we're really stagnated for more than enough. Now, the strategies of the government of South Sudan for fighting COVID-19, there isn't any. There is not any at all whatsoever. You know, as we speak now in South Sudan, individual well-wishers try to struggle here and there to send boxes to medical team in South Sudan of masks. To look at it, medical team in South Sudan do not have adequate masks. The military, the police do not have masks. These are the people who have to be together en masses. So you can just imagine if COVID-19 affects the military or the medical personnel, what will happen to the rest of the average South Sudanese? So the whole situation is totally, first of all, for me, I took note that there's not even any information coming anymore on what's going on in as far as COVID-19 is happening. In terms of preparations, in terms of strategies, in terms of coping, we are at actually coping mechanism stage. What are the coping mechanisms now, and what is post-COVID-19? Those two elements, there's no any information and news. And how are we now, right now? How many infections? You know, other countries.
We say we have 2,139 people who are affected by COVID, and the rest is 38.
And we do not have isolation centers.
The cover is 300. Oh.
You know, those members who have it, those members of our communities or people who are having it, we do not have isolation centers for them. So basically, they go about and around the community members with people, socializing with people, sick at their homes with other family members who do not have masks, to wear around them. So basically, that 2,000 you can multiply by whatever number of people that sadly, I keep my faith. I keep my faith and my prayer in our Creator, in our ancestors, in God, in Allah, that to protect our people of South Sudan, because they're innocent as it is, and we have been victims of many things. Let we be spared from COVID-19. This is my hope, because I cannot look at the government with any coping mechanisms or any strategies to fight COVID-19.
But what do you suggest will be the solution for that?
Well, to me, the solution is to continue educating the people on the prevention of COVID. That information must go on. We're a society that is highly cultural, that love to be together, weddings, funerals, gatherings, sitting together. And of course...
and in the policy level, what should be taken?
And the policy level, of course, you begin with, first of all, the sensitization. And you should have provided for isolation centers, masks, some basic humanitarian assistance, because, people are told to do social distancing. So that means we cannot be in the markets, we cannot be in public buses, we cannot be whatever doing other things that to get income. So obviously there's got to be some humanitarian assistance to the people to help them cope with the hunger, because now people would be in a situation between fighting COVID-19, that is social distancing and whatnot, but then a lockdown, but then at the same time they gotta eat. People gotta eat food, So basically, the government has to have a comprehensive, multi-layered policy in as far as fighting COVID-19. Begins with the knowledge, and the humanitarian service should not be only confined to food, but as well water. Because in South Sudan, we do not have running water in our taps, and COVID-19, you have to wash hands and all that, and soap. So basically, water and soap should be part of that. But how will the government of South Sudan get this? This is the question. A government that has already lost trust and faith of the people and of the world community. Because look, the situation of the millions of dollars provided for the COVID task force in February 2020, where did the money go?
So I'm going to another point. One of the projects that you're working around, the Dr. Jongeren Peace Institute for Women, and you talk about the vision that you see regionally and internationally, how the think tank will be working abroad to discuss some issues. Just some of the issues that are happening in the country right now. There is 35% representation of the women in the government, and we know that the president have appointed now 8 first, and then the SPLMIO come with the candidate for Upper Nile. Only 1 woman that was appointed within those governance. And there is other issues like sexual abuse, sexual violence against women. How the center will be discussing these issues in an internal level, and how are you thinking of engaging the women who are under the ground in the project?
First of all, the motto and the vision of Dr. Garang Institute, Peace Institute for Women, is all about 2 things. The most important thing is that women are inherently peacemakers. Women between communities, in families, women tend to be great peacemakers. And South Sudan, as a country that has lacked peace for so long, women should and could play a central pivotal role in peacemaking, whether it's at peace processes level or at post-conflict level. Women can continue to become great actors in peacemaking. And peace is not just talking about peace and culture of peace and all that, but peace is also through education. The quality of education provided in the country, in primary schools, in adult education and all that. The more we have women with background on peace and articulating on issues of peace involved in such activities, the more we will further the peace into the country. So the idea is eventually not only empowerment of women to become the peace actors in a mainstream manner, because they do it informally from time immemorial. So it is important to realize it officially and to mainstream it, to make it fully funded and to be everywhere. That politically empowered in all levels, basically, but as well to make South Sudan as a nation to export peace.
So when you talk about the curriculum that should be include this kind of values, which kind of values are you talking about, or what should be what the design of the curriculum should be look like?
Well, the curriculum obviously must do a few things. One is like we said earlier on, we have issues of we come from a history of marginalization as a people of South Sudan, and we come from a history of since 2005 and onwards. We come from another type of history, that of tribalism and favoritism. So basically, when we begin to develop a curriculum, an education curriculum to our primary school students, as well as to higher learners, as well as adult education, we must do peace education in there. That we have to introduce about other cultures within the Republic of South Sudan. So it comes from the vision of We64, inclusivity, understanding one another as a people, loving one another as a people. So basically, from when you're as little as you can be in primary class and up to the throughout your education learning, it's important to instill in us the culture of knowing the diversity of the nation. So the quality of education would be in a way to reflect the aspirations of the people of South Sudan, who we are as a people, and our history. So of course, accordingly, the history will be put in such a way that who are the various communities that contributed towards our struggle to become who we are. So there will not be domination or overlooking of any community whatsoever, but every community has its part that it has played to where we are today as a people. So it's a holistic approach, it's a whole change of mindset, and of course building the culture of patriotism into the nation. And you cannot build patriotism without nationalism. Nationalism must begin the whole thing first, because you cannot be a patriot when you're tribal. Then you're not a patriot. You're a divisionist person. You have to be a person who loves your country from the beginning of its jurisdiction, the border, to the very end part of the border, in the center, in the middle, and all in between. So it's very important to create that awareness and that level of political consciousness, civic consciousness of the people of South Sudan, all of us, to know one another, to get to know one another, and all that. So that the curriculum must be of such, and our history, to create heroism among us. Who were our heroes? Who were they? All of them, and men and women. Men and women, different communities, men and women, different ages, and so forth and so on. Because if you notice, in South Sudan, we have a culture of glorifying this. The more senior you are as a person in the government or in the army, the more people glorify you. But the foot soldier, the cleaner, the basic person that does a lot of things for us, that has sacrificed their lives for us, people don't talk about them. But people talk mostly with pride about certainty. So we need to re-educate ourselves, to reset our mind thinking through education. Back to the Peace Institute. The philosophy is to realize the unsung heroines in our society, which is women as peacemakers. Women have been peacemakers inherently, traditionally. That's what they've been, but no one recognizes this in the society. So we will identify through the Institute women in different communities. What have they been doing throughout the years of their life? Even those who have died, we want to document their names and to thank them, and to learn about them. What did they do in their communities and all that? That will help to push now for women to be in mainstream and everything. And also even women the pioneers who, for example, who were the first ones to run banks in South Sudan, for example, or the pioneers were the first ones to set up hotels, because all these efforts contributed towards stability in some form, which means peace. So basically, we need to demystify peace, to make it into a day-to-day kind of philosophy of living. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
The second aspect of it, of course, is very important, is that We want South Sudan to change completely on the map of the world from the way we are known as. Because South Sudan now is known as the land that is always having violence, the land that is always having wars. So through women, through the realization of women work in peace and all that, through the Institute, South Sudan now exports peace. We want to be able to now go around the world and talk about peace. You know why? Because we are the people who the most missed peace, who the most yearn for peace. So it's just touching the right knob to shift us into the paradigm of peace. When we get to there, I believe there will be so many zillions of South Sudanese who will become lecturers of peace around the world, speakers of peace around the world. So we want to be able to export peace. We want our ambassadors around the world to be able to participate in conflict resolution, in fact, conflict prevention. Go quickly. You know, we want as a nation to expedite a team of 2-3 people and say, go to this country quickly before they get into a fully fledged war. Because we know the signs. We know how wars begin and things like that, and we know what the absence of peace is all about. So basically, that's what the two most objectives of the Dr. John Garang Institute, Peace Institute for Women, is to realize the role of women in peace, and has been since time immemorial, and to mainstream it, to put it into real recognition, and for people to demystify, to understand it in day-to-day life, and as well to reach South Sudan into a nation of exporter of peace, not exporter of violence and wars.
We come to the point of state. How do you envision the state issue will be implementing, and what it's expecting? Is there enough resources to manage these states?
Currently, the formation of the government of the states that was just been done a few days ago.
Yeah.
I don't want to sound pessimistic. But the reality is there's no money in the government of South Sudan. There's always a question that shrouds the only revenue generating ministry, which is the Ministry for Petroleum.
And with the COVID, it went to 59%, 95%, as the president say.
Yeah.
Okay, but the problem is, I think there is a most of the all, like also in the president's speech, where he mentioned that they should use the tax revenue to replace the income and be able to pay salary for some of the citizens. Do you think this is more logical? And there is another question also, how the government can work in the other sectors. Like, for example, we have the agriculture, we have the mineral, we have the natural resources. How they will be able to use this different kind of for as a source of income?
You know, taxation in South Sudan will not work for now. It will not work. I mean, we don't have even systems to begin with of proper taxation. First of all, you cannot tax a society that does not have an income. A society that does not produce. What do we produce in South Sudan? I mean, what commodities, what goods do we produce in South Sudan? What do we do? Do we have industries? Do we have anything? Do we even have, like you say, if you look at agriculture, do we have meaningful farms, so to speak? We don't have. So how are you going to tax someone who, as it is, probably almost 70% unemployed by all standards?
I think when they're talking about tax, they're talking also about the borders.
Yeah, but the borders, this is what I'm coming to. When the nation is without any income at all whatsoever, those people who bring goods from the borders, we're challenged with two things. One is the traders that bring things are faced with massive corruption at the border entry, at the entry of all our borders. So by the time they extorted money, formally and informally, officially and unofficially, bribes and the government fees and what, by the time that's all done, they bring the commodities into mainland South Sudan, to different parts of South Sudan. Who is going to buy these goods if the prices are this crazy? Mind you, our currency is highly inflated as it is. The South Sudanese pounds is almost valueless at the moment. So these traders, it's a matter of time before, it's only a matter of time before they also give in and give up doing this business altogether, because they're not getting anything out of it. So basically, because in any case, their commodities most likely will come and sit for a long time as well. Who are the people to purchase these items, really? The elite that have money still, and they're stealing from the people. How many are they? Do you understand? So basically, it's a very complex situation. What President Kiir and his Minister of Finance, if at all they can do that, they need to revamp the whole finance sector, financial finance sector of South Sudan completely. Look at currently the main revenue generator, which is the petroleum industry. Yeah, exactly. And look at it from its source all the way to how it's done, and what is the end result of it. How much money is really brought in there. And that's where there's a huge question mark there, because we believe that a lot of the revenues are actually looted almost there and then within that particular ministry. We don't get to people. The South Sudanese government does not even get to see, let alone the people of South Sudan, where these revenues go to. So that has to be scrutinized. Kiir cannot abandon something and start to look for another thing to jump on. So easy, always easy, always easy. This is the problem we have in South Sudan. We want quick cash money. So where you think somebody else's sweat, or now they're jumping onto the few traders, the handful traders that brave it for us, bring whatever commodities from East Africa, and then you want to get that money off of them. You understand that? Just like it was easy oil that was coming from South Sudan, from Unity State, that was already established by Bashir government in 1997. So it was already up and running and everything, and we inherited everything from them. So it was easy. But Kiir must look into back to back. Where has he gone wrong with his administration in 2005? Where has there been the weaknesses? And I will tell you that he cannot jump into another situation that will help bail them out. It has to be from where the problems have been. Then thereafter, how can they establish systems in place within those sectors, that is the petroleum sector, in such a way that the money is not only going to salaries, but it should go to projects, which is now brings us to the diversification of the economy. So you look at, be it the mining sector, the one that is in Eastern Equatoria, where the gold is at, but also establish it in a way that it also can generate, not for looters again. You just like what happened with the oil sector. Again, we look at the agriculture, when we say the diversification, the agriculture sector. So what can be done there? And so forth. Fisheries, animal husbandry. There are so many sectors, food produce, like fruits and making juice and export to other countries. So basically, you have to correct where has been going wrong for the longest time, because you do not want to inherit the wrongs from A to B, because the same attitude and the same corruption that has been in the petroleum sector shall be experienced as well in the taxation of the traders sector. It will be the same thing, because corruption is rampant in the borders. We all know that this has been sadly for a long time. That's the scenario. Yeah.
So 4.3 million refugees and IDPs. When is this crisis going to end?
When we have a good government in the country. I mean, I don't want to sound pessimistic. I don't want to sound like I think there's nothing good at all that can come out of the government in Juba. But honestly speaking, everything that you analyze is a symptom of the cause. Everything that we analyze, the refugees, the internally displaced people. I mean, it's a shame that we have thousands of internally displaced people inside the capital itself. And no one talks about it. No one has done anything serious about their integration back into their home areas, ancestral land, as it were. And the same thing with the refugees. I mean, the refugees would rather live in refugee camps and maybe get the scanty whatever that the United Nations give them.
But there is still some challenges in this refugees camp. Recently and predominantly, there is the COVID-19, and then there is a lot of some of the domestic violence that women are facing in these refugee camps.
Mm.
How can we solve that? How can this one be solved?
Well, I can never get tired of sensitization and awareness raising, in the sense that we do have some organizations that work on human rights issues, on women's rights issues in the refugee camps, in some of the refugee camps, at least the ones in East Africa. And Sudan remains a huge challenge. Khartoum remains a huge challenge for us. But in Kenya and Uganda, we do have some NGOs that really working hard with the women. But the whole thing of awareness raising, we need evidence, we need empowerment, the women to be able to come forward and report the matter. So sadly, our society and the way our culture is misinterpreted, because our culture and traditions are naturally beautiful, very protective of women, but there is abuse of our cultures. And so these ladies, those women, girls who get violated sexually and physically, because there's domestic violence, and there's also underage marriages, forced marriages. There's all sorts of things taking place in the refugee camps against women. They need to be sensitized and made aware and empowered that here there are some NGOs that can be for your help. Here the United Nations laws apply, which protect women, CEDAW and so forth, so the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women applies. CRC, Convention on the Rights of the Child, where the girl child is equal to the girl boy and all that. So this information is not disseminated enough to make women empowered, and what can she do? Where should she go immediately something like that happens, and all that. So there's more work that needs to be. I feel very passionate about our women in internally displaced camps and in refugee camps, because they live in a closed up, claustrophobic society. They are not as free to mingle as back home in the villages with everybody in their natural environment. So it can get very tough, and a lot of unreported, because people are just scared. They just want to be able to get whatever basic food and keeping her family safe, and all that kind of basic stuff. But empowerment through sensitization is very, very important. Perhaps if we can have radio stations in refugee camps, to address women issues. I think that's something that we're trying to work with some of the organizations, the CC, which is Community Empowerment Development Organization, that has been working very hard in both, especially in Uganda, on the issues of violence against women, as well as on COVID-19 sensitization. So we need to talk of radio. I think radio would be very important. A lot of people probably listen to radio more, so that, and I know that from the past, other communities in refugee camps always had radio stations on peace education. So that was also helpful. So maybe, something like that would probably help a lot. But ultimately, of course, the best thing is for people to be able to go home, and
so you won the Mandela Ubuntu Prize advocacy against how current leaders are running the country, and I think that was 2007. 17.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Coming to the point of the AU has sanctioned South Sudan for not paying the membership fee, and the East African Community from 2018 to 2021. So how do you envision South Sudan in a regional level for the upcoming 10 years?
First of all, South Sudan came into being because of solidarity also, largely. We as a people, we determined, we united ourselves, we organized ourselves, like I said, from 1955 and again 1983, until the world embraced us as the world's youngest nation. Obviously, when I say the world, that means IGAD, that means African Union, as well as the United Nations. So we're grateful as a people. We continue to be grateful as a people to our brothers and sisters from within Africa who stood in solidarity with us in our cause, because it wasn't easy. We realize that. But of course, in Africa itself, it's not a taboo. It's not news to have dictator rulers, to have corruption, to have whatever we're experiencing in South Sudan. A lot of it is being experienced in many parts of Africa. Sadly, Africa was founded beautifully by great leaders who helped us gain our independence from colonialism, by great leaders such as Nkrumah, Ghana's Nkrumah, Jamal Abdel Nasser of Egypt, and Julius Nyerere, Mwalimu Julius Nyerere of Tanzania. They really said, and Kama of Botswana. Yeah, they really set a very good foundation for African unity, for coming together, and because they formed that African Union, the Organization of African Unity, OAU before it was called. So to come together, because we need to bargain together as a people. I mean, for example, South Sudan is a country, we're only 12 million. China is 1.2 billion. How can South Sudan, 12 million people, bargain with China of 1.2 billion people? It's impossible, isn't it? We will not have a fair bargain. We will be pushed in some corner. Or, for example, Kenya, which is 56 million, how can it bargain or negotiate with the United States of America, which is 300 plus million people? It's like a 5-year-old kid, but negotiating an agreement with a 30-year-old man. It's weird.
How South Sudan will be looked on the region of East Africa?
Yeah.
And so Africa, like in terms of development, in terms of the political vision, the short and the longer.
Coming to that. So because when I talk about unity as South Sudanese, a lot of people don't understand it. Some people don't understand it. Some people who think, but I'm a Bari. How do we want me to unite with a Nuer or a Dinka, and they're grabbing my land? And a Dinka will say, but how do you want me to unite with a Nuer? Or Nuer will say, how do you want me to unite with a Dinka? Because we are very different people. We are each other's enemies. I'm not talking all, but some people will think like that. The same thing when we come to the African continent. When we say South Sudan or Kenya or Uganda, Tanzania, Botswana, etc., coming together as a continent under the banner of the African Union in a united way, it helps us to bargain and negotiate for Africa in a better way. The same way we as South Sudanese coming together, we'll be able to achieve our aspirations, principles of democracy, equality, justice, and prosperity. It's the same thing at the macro level as a continent. So it's very important for people to see that. Now, specifically, every country is endowed with its own natural resources. Kenya, be it Uganda, be it South Sudan, etc. We all have our own different gifts. So coming together doesn't mean that another country is going to come and take over me as a country. No, I will still, as South Sudan, maintain my sovereign status and be able, within the continent, within my neighbors, be able to interact social, culturally, economically, security, etc., diplomatically, and along all the levels. So when South Sudan, a landlocked country that does not have any outlet to the world, we do not have a port, we do not have anything. Obviously, to us, Kenya would look at us as South Sudan. We have oil, we have gold, and all these other natural resources and agriculture. But we do not have what Kenya has, which is the passport. You understand? So it only makes sense that South Sudan, for example, and Kenya or Uganda or Tanzania enter into some bilateral agreements of I get this from you, you get this from me. We benefit from each other along this way and along that other way. So basically, it is an issue of complementing each other. It's an issue of added advantage to each other, because we do need each other within the, for example, the East African community. So basically, definitely, South Sudan is a landlocked nation. South Sudan has petrol, oil. It needs to be able to have connection with Kenya, to be able to use the means that Kenya has to be able to take the oil further and beyond. Of course, we already have such agreements and arrangements with the government of Sudan, with the Sudanese government in Khartoum there. We already have that. But the ability to have the options, and the ability to weigh the options, which is best for any of us, which is win-win for all of us, would be a better choice than having limited choices, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. The people of Africa, the people of South Sudan, and the people of Kenya have a lot in common. We share many tribes together. We share many cultures, just like we share with Sudan. We share many cultures together, many communities together. So the first benefit that all our people within East Africa, be it South Sudan and Sudan, South Sudan and Kenya, and Uganda, and vice versa, Uganda and South Sudan, and Kenya and South Sudan, and so forth, there is a lot that our people, in the first place, social, culturally, will benefit from that, from those type of cooperations between the governments. Of course, economically, there are huge benefits. South Sudan is a member of COMESA, which is the economic bloc within East Africa, so it's Eastern Africa. So that means South Sudan will be able to trade in commodities within the East African community and vice versa. Of course, there are a lot of subsidiaries there. There are a lot of concessions that are made there by the time you are a member of such an entity. And that's why, just like with the African Union, we pay our dues. We're supposed to pay our membership because when we utilize the commodities we have in our country and all the whatever that we have, we will benefit by being members of such larger entities and in interchange and exchange of commodities. So it is very important that South Sudan maintains cordial, diplomatic relationships, maintaining its commitment, fulfilling its commitment by paying its membership due. Because when you are a country and a state, once you sign to an agreement, it is a must for the Minister of Finance every year, when they do their financial year and every minister brings forward their budgets and everything, then obviously you have to calculate, as the Minister for Finance and Economic Planning, development planning, you must make sure that membership of all these entities, even the United Nations, always have dues that we have to pay as members. So a member. So because they will come in handy. I mean, it's throughout the year by paying that membership, because your commodities, you cannot lock them inside South Sudan. What good is it? You have to trade them. You have to take them further within the continent and beyond. Yeah. So
currently with the free trade area agreement, how easier these things will be, and how do you think that it will be an advantage for our youth in South Sudan?
Youth or use?
Youth.
Oh, use. Yeah, I mean,
population.
You know what? I'm an advocate. I'm an avid advocate of multi-layered integration of the people of Africa. So free trade, free movement of the people, free airspace between the people of Africa, free movement, free exchange of goods, free exchange of expertise. There is abundance. There's so many opportunities that I find very important that of use to South Sudan. The reason why I capitalize always in some of your questions, because I want us as a people, we have a problem in South Sudan sometimes, and that worries me. In South Africa, that from time to time we have, it comes on the news, we see it, we experience it, that xenophobic attacks on other African nationals that take place in South Africa. I'm concerned sometimes as South Sudanese that sometimes we look down upon, or we use derogatory language against our fellow Africans from other African nations within East Africa, and sometimes some members of the organized forces, be it police or military, go further than that by maybe actually physically abusing some of the foreign nationals and extorting them as well. So at the political leadership level, it's very important that South Sudan government, through the foreign ministry, of course, but directly to the people through the presidency, to ensure to relay these messages to the people. The South Sudan come from a long history of a struggle, where we were yesterday, where we are today, where we headed tomorrow. It's very important that they came into the country, the authorities allowed them. They gave them permission to come into the country. Now, you do not have the law in your hands to start abusing somebody just because he or she is foreign, and he should be or she be abused by you just like that. That's what not they came for. So the laws must take its course. If there is any problem that these people are doing wrong in the country, then there are laws that should be applied, and they can be dealt with accordingly. But no one should take the law into their hands, not verbally, not emotionally, not physically. That's wrong. So through a lot of political relaying of messages in among the leadership in South Sudan, that must be relayed to the people all the time. And when you debate such matters in parliament openly as well, the various regional cooperation agreements that the government of South Sudan is entering into, what do you think as members of parliament? These are the pros and cons, and of course there are clusters in the parliament, working clusters and caucuses that work on these issues, will deliberate further, and there be some kind of knowledge and sharing like that. These parliamentarians who are supposedly elected by the people should be able to go back into their constituencies and speak that as well. This is very important because it ties in with social, cultural, and trade, security, so many layers to it that must be disseminated to the people. And that's what I say, having a politically or civic conscious citizens is very important process for the people, so that they also carry it responsibly. Being a citizen is not lawlessness. Being a citizen is also...
So for the 75% of the youth population, and they have other issues that they're facing, like unemployment, the freedom of movement. You think that the agreement will solve these issues, and we will be culturally integrated to the youth, to other youth in the continent?
If the agreement is utilized properly, obviously.
Okay.
It's spelled there. If it's applied, it all depends on the political will to want to apply and not to just sign.
Okay. So the UN has issued the extended of the armed sanction, the arm embargo, and the sanction against individual and ban them from traveling. Is that going to end the leadership corruption in South Sudan?
Leadership corruption is a very, very huge matter. It's over and beyond the embargo, the guns and embargo, So, but the UN sanctions on arms or embargo on arms is one part of the leadership or corruption in leadership question. It's the leadership question. Corruption and leadership is huge. It begins from incompetence, so people who are occupying seats that are doing nothing, to stealing of mass corruption and so many things, and guns is part of it, gun smuggling. So arms embargo is I am one person that really supports arms embargo in South Sudan. And it's not only on the government. The arms embargo is actually it's on all participating partners in it. So it goes to the government as well as opposition groups, which bring in guns into the country, as well as business persons from within East Africa or neighboring countries who are supplying these arms. It's a whole chain of them. To me, it's very important entry point for two reasons. One is it focuses on trying to detangle or make free space for peace, make room for peace, because the more guns is the opposite of peace. So when you control the guns, you give more room for peace and peace dialogue. Secondly, you begin to fiscally tackle the issue of corruption.
Mhm.
and connect it with profiting from wars.
Mhm.
So basically, when you begin to see who are the ones still smuggling or bringing guns into the country, because when you do an embargo, there's a lot of monitoring supposedly of
Mhm.
the movement of guns, where they come from, and all that. So when you begin to do that, then you begin to pinpoint people, individuals within the government, within the armed opposition, within the business community that is dealing with that within East Africa, and maybe perhaps other governments in East Africa as well, and be able to pin it on them that there is
Mhm.
corruption.
Mhm.
Understand that, because
Mhm.
it's a fiscal thing, because it's
Mhm.
huge amount of money that
Mhm.
is used on these arms.
Mhm.
So then people will begin to question, is it the corruption only in South Sudan? Perhaps even you will find out if for example, government X in East Africa, I'm not naming
Mhm.
any country, the president or the vice president is involved in something like that, then that implicates that ex government, that
Mhm.
government in East Africa implicates it in corruption, in blood, shedding blood in South Sudan. So there will be
Mhm.
other charges that can be brought forward against some of those
But
other.
there is even something because the UN report also said that still there is amount of huge gun that went to enter South Sudan
Yeah.
after and before the new embargo decision.
Well, the UN is that of course poses two questions. One is how much monitoring and evaluation, how much really
Uh-huh.
screening and monitoring taking place
Mhm.
by the United Nation member states in the neighboring countries of South Sudan,
Uh-huh.
because be it Kenya, Uganda, these are members of the United Nations too. So
Mhm.
are they complying with the rule of the United Nations? So they can be held also accountable and responsible if found to be part of this. Are they
Okay.
aiding, facilitating? Are they cooperating with that sanction? Is very in that embargo. The
Uh-huh.
second part of it, of course, is that it's a complicated since it's marred with corruption.
Mhm.
Since the whole practice of smuggling guns or bringing in guns, importing guns in huge quantities into the
Mhm.
country, in itself is corruption. In
Mhm.
itself, a lot of it is marred with corruption. Obviously, that means that there is a lot of bribery taking place to silence, excuse me, to silence any neighboring country monitoring bodies on the guns. So
Mhm.
uh,
Mhm.
I'm sorry.
Fine. We are still on the show.
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah. So basically, it's a question that we all must ask the United Nations: how much monitoring taking place? Are they your member states within those nations, neighboring nations? Are they compliant
Mhm.
with your own sanctions, embargo, and what are the mechanisms and all that? And of course, we have to take corruption seriously in East Africa. Corruption
Mhm.
is a huge problem, is a huge challenge we have in East Africa. People are bribed in all levels, in all layers. It's sometimes it's shocking. It's just
Mhm.
shocking, yeah,
So, going to your position for the former SPLM External Relations Security
yeah.
as a female, as the first female, one of our role was to organize the diaspora. How do you envision the diaspora involvement in the STEP movement and also to be part of the development in South Sudan?
Hmm. Um, I was the first female in the CPA, Secretary for External Relations, but female, yeah, the first female secretary.
Female secretary during the CPA
Yeah,
from 2008
for
to 2000.
external relations, yeah. But we had the first female Mama Kezia Lengwa. She was the secretary for women, child welfare, and gender in the SPLM a long time ago.
Mhm. The
So
XPLM external.
yeah, exactly. But I was the first for external relations, but also during the CPA. So
Mhm.
earlier on, there was somebody else before me. So yeah, uh, the diaspora are a huge untapped resource for South Sudan.
Mhm.
um, the diaspora, even during the South Sudan struggle for independence and freedom, diaspora played a huge role in sensitizing the world community, policymakers around the world, civil society, faith-based organizations, the media, you name it. They really worked so hard, tirelessly, to educate the world about what the people of South Sudan want, who are they, what are they going through, and all that kind of thing. So they sustained the momentum out there peacefully, without any guns and without any divisions and all that. So to me, the diaspora is a huge untapped resource in terms of peacemaking, in terms of advocacy on South Sudan, what South Sudan has to offer the world, educating the world about South Sudan, the world's youngest nation, Africa's youngest nation, as it were. And the third element, of course, directly in development in South Sudan. The diaspora are people, of course, of various backgrounds and professions and exposure to how the world is run out there. Because if you look at South Sudan government, majority of them haven't really worked before in proper systems, let alone democratic and stable economic system. Most of them have worked, if some of them have worked maybe in the old Sudan under a system that was already marginalizing them. So the experience that they have may not necessarily be of sound mindedness. How do you work as an independent country? So that's new to all of them. So basically, our diaspora are a group of people that are working in various places. Some work in East Africa, in Kenya, Uganda, which are nations that have been independent for a long time. Some work in Egypt, perhaps, and some work around the world, Australia, US, UK, Canada, and all those places. So basically, they do come with a lot of dynamic ideas, exciting dynamic ideas, development, futuristic technology, and all that kind of stuff, and sound progressive economic ideas as well. So to me, I see steps appealing to the diaspora, making sure that we unite our forces. That's what we've been working from 2017 up to now on uniting the diaspora, because of course when the motherland, South Sudan, is divided along ethnic line inside South Sudan, obviously it is taken also in South Sudan. So for example, when in the diaspora, for example, when I went to the US in November 2018, October and November 2018, I called for meetings. I went to meetings. I noticed that when you go to churches, you'll find there is a Muru church, there is a Dinka Boer church, there is, people have divided even in the faith. Secondly, when I asked to meet with them as a community, talk about our peace, about the situation going on in South Sudan. Once they learned that my background is from Equatoria, some people were hesitant to come. Only few Equatorians came. Maybe 2 or 3 Nuer came, maybe 2 or 3 Dinka came. And I could see it. For the first time, I actually saw how polarized we are as a people when I was out among our diaspora community end of 2018. I realized that, and even people sat in cocoons, and you can see the physical appearance as well. It's like, I'm setting my borders and I don't want to interact with you. That tribe, that community, I have nothing to do with you. So once I realized that, I went quiet, first of all, and I was looking at people, around the people and everything. So basically, when it came to talking and speaking publicly with them, I began breaking the ice. I started talking, challenging us, how we were as a people, how we will always be as a people, and how much beautiful it has been. And when was the last time you spoke, you picked the phone and called, if you are Majak, when was the last time you called Akang, or Chwal, by the names I'm talking about? If you're a Dinka, or if you're a Nuer, when was the last time, for example, you called a Dinka friend? And if you're a Bari, when was the last time you called a Dinka or Nuer friend? So I started challenging people like that, and people began to relax. Within 20 minutes or so, because that's who we are as a people. We love each other. I mean, we have lived together. So within less than 20 minutes or so, other people started coming. So I could see people texting friends, please come. It's okay. It's like, these were the people who came to test the grounds first, advanced team or whatever, and then finally other people start coming, and then we realized. And I made sure that at the end of, in between every session, I'm asking people, please, what do you feel about this gathering? What is your impression about this gathering? they immediately started saying the same that I sensed
Mm-hmm.
from body language. They said, we were,
Mm-hmm.
it was they said, I don't remember, I think that the predominant thing that say, I don't remember the last time I sat in a gathering where other communities were in
Mm-hmm.
before 2013.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine 5 years by
Mm-hmm.
2018, people had not sat together from different communities. That
Mm-hmm.
happened in Nebraska, that happened in Sioux Falls in South Dakota, and other places, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
now it started to change, and that's what STEPS is all about.
Mm-hmm.
Breaking the ice, trying to tell us, wait a second, we lived together before, fine. We shall
Mm-hmm.
live together forever, fine. Let us overcome this politicization of our ethnic communities, come together.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we talk about the peace messages. What is peace to you?
Mm-hmm.
So when people start now articulating the issues, what do they see peace? Some say peace is to stop the land grabbing. Other people will say peace is to apply right
Mm-hmm.
laws. Other people say peace is to elect a government that represents us. Peace
Mm-hmm.
is to have all of us represented from the different communities, 64 communities represented in the government. So messages began articulated, you know, people
Mm-hmm.
began to articulate the message, and that's what we are at as steps. And of course, then we will move very swiftly towards identifying
The future.
identifying also the future,
Mm-hmm.
identifying how do we envisage ourselves, and what can I do individually. So basically, every person from the diaspora who becomes a member will begin to start saying, that's what I see myself as in South Sudan. I wish to be part of maybe establishment of many schools. I wish
Mm-hmm.
to be part of establishment of many affordable homes. I wish to be, and so forth and so on. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, people will begin now to get to that, because trust building takes a long time. It's
Mm-hmm.
a huge undertaking. Yeah.
So, the future of steps, how do you see it, and what is expecting out from you?
Yeah, we are working at the moment on our 2-year action plan,
Mm-hmm.
bearing in mind COVID, of course, and the current situation in the country. So our priorities will mainly focus on making sure that the government stays on track on peace.
Mm-hmm.
The government does not break up the peace or make any unilateral crazy decisions on their own. So keeping them on their toes, checking them, making sure that they adhere to the current peace agreement, the formation of the government on course, and implementing on course on the peace agreement, because we don't have time to dilly dally. We don't have to delay. We don't have time to delay anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, our message will be to ensure the provision and guarantees of basic freedoms in the country. Guarantees of basic freedoms in the country. This for us is very, very essential part of the work that we are undertaking at the moment. Will be starting to launch on, because unless we have guarantees of basic freedoms, such as freedom of expression, association, and meetings, and all that, we will not have room for multipartism. We will not have room for good elections, and I'm talking about free, fair, credible elections. So if we don't have those freedoms guaranteed and be talked about from now and pressing the government to guarantee them, then we will have a problem of not having a credible government to be elected in a credible manner. So we will have a problem. We'll still be in the same stagnation situation, and we don't want that to happen. So basically, the focus will be in and around that, and we will be articulating the strategies in how we are going to launch all this and how we're going to go about them. It's going to be launched around November 2020 this year, the 2-year action plan. Yeah.
Last point. Do you regret Suzan, the lady who went 20 years? She was 20 years old and she went and joined the SPLM to the Revolution movement, to the personality where she is today.
I don't regret. I don't regret at all. I was 22 years old. I don't regret at all. I've spent 20 years that I'm fortunate that at the beginning, when I got into the movement, to the SPLM, it was at the time when diplomacy and negotiation peace negotiation was the talk, was the rife, was the everything. So I was able to learn from history, learn our history, hands on with the all leaders around me at the time, and learn also as a leader to be patient, um, to be coachable, to be to no, not to be to get arrogant and thinking I am it and I'm everything, because that's the problem also we have, because a leader self-regulates themselves. They have to learn to self-regulate themselves in the first place, and be able to listen, be able to do so many things based on what you hear, what the people want. And so becoming a student at the earlier years of my joining the SPLM, or our liberation struggle at the time of negotiation and diplomacy, I was blessed actually. I feel like that, even though it wasn't easy. There are times I felt like quitting, especially in 1999. At times it was really hard, and you're told you're just a kid, sit down, you don't know anything, you're a woman, you're nothing. And sometimes you're not even just told verbally, but by action and by exclusion. So every time your name is added on a list, somebody comes and deletes it. Somebody who's not even a decision maker, but they just can't stand women. They just can't stand young women. So delete her. It's a waste of time, waste of a space, a spot. So basically, I learned not to take it personal. I learned to forgive. I learned I would cry, of course. I would feel bad. I would feel hurt. I want to quit, but I also, as much as I was experiencing that, I learned to persist, to remain on course. So I don't regret anything. And all the while, I made contacts with the people. To me, the ability to serve is the most amazing part. When you serve people, especially the right kind of people, I'm not talking about the ones who are full of themselves or who think they're already leader and they're well established, but I'm talking about the real people. When you go into a village and you see a group of women, or a group of children or young people, and you're able to sit down with them, hear their stories, and able to direct them where to look for solutions or advise them, and you see a look of possibilities in their eyes. From when you got in, they were either afraid to speak or thought maybe it's not possible for them to make it. It's like their dream is just too much a high dream. When a young person tells me, I would like to be able to get into a place where I can do sports, and you place them maybe with the right organization or a community development center that probably has that part, and suddenly you see his eyes are lit, he's happy, smiles on his face, there is an opportunity. That feeling is unmatchable. You cannot match it with any feeling. The same thing when you see women, and you tell women, when you get educated, when you get trained, you'll be able to speak like me and walk in front of men without feeling ashamed of being a woman. But because you are a human being, you have your mind and you have your ability to decide and produce and do things. These women feel very empowered and powerful because you're demystifying it for them. And then looking at you, they're like, if she can make it, I can make it. If she is able to speak like that, I can make it. So you can see the resolve in their eyes immediately that that's what I can be. Next thing, tomorrow you hear those same women that you met with have already enrolled in the adult education center, because they were contemplating and debating and doubting and thinking twice. Now you came and you helped encourage the idea, and they saw it. They saw the possibility in your action, in your self-esteem and confidence as a woman yourself. So they're like, I can be like that. And that is a beautiful feeling, because you see in the eyes. The same thing with the children, and so forth and so on. So basically, that to me remains always the thing. And I do it today. I mean, to this day, in the virtual world of COVID-19 and our social distancing and inability to meet face to face and shake hands, and as much as we would love to as a people, many people feel encouraged to inbox me privately, be it on Facebook or Twitter or WhatsApp, like various WhatsApp groups, and some of the youth inbox me, and they're stuck in a situation. They're frustrated in a situation. They're crying. They're hurting in a situation. They're overly optimistic in a situation, and they're indifferent, whatever. But there's something that is over and beyond their capacity. They reach out and back and forth text, and that, and then we see possibilities that perhaps the two of us, or maybe the person who asked me, who was stuck, and it feels great. Virtually, just only via text alone, you see that you're able to break barriers together, in togetherness, and now they go away from you feeling, I can, we can, you know what I'm saying? So basically, I have no regrets at all whatsoever. I would have liked to have spent a little more extra time with my family, especially my son. I would have liked to have spent more time with him in his earlier years, but every time I had to be away from my son to go to different parts of South Sudan, different villages, or different parts of around the world, every time I had to do that, I had to hug my son a little extra, and I whispered something little to him and say, I'm doing it for all the other little kids out there who are like you, without parents, who are this and that. And maybe, I don't know, maybe he understood. I don't know. But I tried also when he was as little as 3 years old in 2004 to take him to different parts of South Sudan, Rumbek, Yambi, Oye, and he saw the kids there. With rolling balls made out of paper, made out of, even some of it are wires, or whatever. And my son would ask, Mommy, why do they have this? Why don't they have a proper ball? And then I would sit him down. I would say, when you see Mommy coming all the time and trying to do this and that, it's for those kids to be able to have a ball. It's because we're in a war situation. We need to have peace. So I seize those kind of opportunities to make him understand those kind of things and reason them out, that because of that, so because he loves other kids. Of course, he was growing up just like any other child. He loves other kids, and he wants those other kids to be also as happy as him, or as having a ball, or whatever as him. And questions like, well, but Mom, which school they go to here? I don't see any school. So you also learn from children those kind of questions, and you, as a person working for other people, you say, I'm determined now, this village or this town must have a school or something like that. So basically, no regrets whatsoever, and it's a life of ever enriching and unfolding, and I don't know where the 20 years gone. It's like 20 months. I mean, it went so quickly. Yeah.
Okay. I think we reached the end of our interview for today.
Yeah.
I would like to thank you for joining me. Thank you so much for giving your time to be my platform.
Thank you.
Our interview for today is finished. My guest was Suzan Jambo. She's the founder of STEPS movement of South Sudan. Our topic was how to achieve democracy and peace in South Sudan. I would like to thank also all the viewers who come and join us, send their suggestions, and listen to the conversation. Please follow my platform, The Four Direction. It's a weekly show that we discuss current issue from different part of the world. My name is Mary Apollo. Follow Four Direction on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. I'm live every Thursday from 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Send me your suggestions, your contributions, your thought to the inbox, and I will be able to work on the issues that concerning the citizens. Thank you. Until we meet next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Thank you for everyone who